You can't replace part of the brain. Like, you
treat them the same.
The source of truth for the medtech industry.
Coexists with the prophets.
Robot understands things automatically.
Number one show in the medtech industry.
So Stryker got ahead of that and changed in the 90s, built $1 billion company that held up high, a lot of things.
State of MedTech.
With your host, Omar and Khateeb.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show, and I'm excited for today's guest. You've probably seen him a lot on LinkedIn because he puts out such fantastic content and a steady stream of it, and that's Steve Bell. Many of you know Steve from his previous role as Chief Commercial Officer and Marketing Officer over at CMR Surgical. He has since exited and started his own business called How to Start Up in MedTech. I recommend, if you haven't already, to not only sign up for his newsletter, he has a fantastic course and a lot of great content on his website called How to Start Up in MedTech.com. Steve puts out a lot of great content, not only critiquing and giving insights around the commercial landscape in robotics, but also around commercial excellence. So in this episode, we talk a lot about that. What does it mean to set up a sales team? He has some very fascinating approaches about how salespeople should be trained and compensated these days, along with some strategies. And of course, we talk robots. In this episode, though, while we were diving in, we talked about a technology stack, and I talked to Steve about what he likes the most. And in that conversation, he mentions a software solution that he just can't live without, which is called Showpad. I'm familiar with the technology. I think it's a great one. And so with that, I'm actually very excited to share that today's episode is sponsored by the Forrester Wave leader and all-in-one sales enablement solution, Showpad. I reached out to them and they were like, yeah, absolutely want to sponsor this. And I'm hoping that they'll become a great partner. So let me tell you a little bit about them. So look, we know that medtech buyers have access to more information than ever, and they don't know really what to do with it, actually, most of the times. And at the same time, right, very much overwhelmed with sales and marketing efforts that aren't exactly relevant or personalized. And that's for our end users, which are physicians. Your sales reps have a short amount of time with buyers, and they have to use it to cut through the noise and add real value. As I always say, in order to persuade, you have to get attention. But sellers can't just do that alone. And this is where marketing and sales has to come together and play a team sport. I've talked about this many times on my show. This is where Showpad really excels, and I see Showpad as a bridge for that. That's why I'm a big fan of their product. Their technology is an AI-powered sales enablement operating system that is all about uniting sales and marketing teams around content, training, and tools that actually help you win deals and grow revenue. So get this. Marketing has an easy way to manage and distribute content so sellers have it at the right time every single time. How many of you marketers have that problem where sellers come to you for content and everything and you don't have time to make it and you just don't know how to distribute it or track how well it's performing? So with Showpad, your reps can quickly onboard and access ongoing training to develop the skills they need to gain trust and close deals. Plus, your sellers have compelling ways to engage buyers, whether they're visiting a customer in person or even checking in virtually. So there's no more lugging around devices or all kinds of pamphlets to trade shows. With Showpad, you can bring physical products to life in digital 3D and 360 experiences. The part that I love most is, and again, I talk about this because this is what we need to do to reach commercial excellence in our industry. As Peter Drucker says, if you cannot measure it, it cannot be managed. So with Showpad, everything is measured from seller usage to buyer engagement, so you can make data-driven decisions and time metrics like content views and completed courses to business outcomes like win rates. With that being said, if you're a marketing leader or a sales leader, even a rep who is interested to learn more, and I highly recommend you do, I want you to go and figure out how to unlock your full potential within your sales and marketing teams with Showpad. So go to, get ready for this, showpad.com. That's SHOWPAD.com. Showpad.com/state of MedTech. Okay, make sure to use that URL so that way you get immediately booked for a demo. I highly recommend it. You'll thank me later. Now, with that being said, let's get on our episode with Steve Bell. Enjoy. Hey, everybody, welcome back to the show. I'm joined by a good friend of mine, and this has been like I think a year in the making. We've been missing each other quite a lot. But that's Steve Bell, and hey, we finally made it work. So Steve, former Chief Commercial Officer for CMR, the surgical robotics company. Now he's a startup advisor. He started a new company where he's helping medtech startups commercialize, which has, in my opinion, one of my favorite names, which is How to Start Up in MedTech. Is a great website, howtostartupinmedtech.com. Steve, thank you so much for joining us. How you doing?
Oh, brilliant. And thank you very much for having me on. And it has been just about a year for us to work out to get our schedules together. So that either means we're either not very good at getting our schedules or we're really busy. So we can decide which one it is.
Start the line though. That's what's important. So Steve, thank you for joining. We got a lot of interesting topics to talk about. I always enjoy the content that you post on LinkedIn because, contrarian's not the right way, but you have a very different way of thinking about commercialization and bringing clinical success to the OR, which I like. But before we do that, just for some of my audience that are just getting to know you, give us a little bit about your background in medtech and robotics.
Okay. Yeah, so I've been in medtech all my life. That's all I've done is medtech. 33 years now, just hit 33 years in medtech. And I started my career in J&J when it was in Ethicon before the laparoscopic boom, back selling sutures in the early days, sutures and staplers. And then there was the whole laparoscopic boom, and I was one of the first people in Ethicon endosurgery, went through that whole shift, which was just amazing, really phenomenal time in healthcare. And then I worked on several startups within J&J, such as a cardiac division, which was called Cardiovations, and then on the women's health side on GynaCare. And then about 16 years in, I decided to go and actually do real startups. So I left and I did the California startups. So I did several serial startups in California, down in Irvine. And after that, I did some help to some orthopedics companies. One was RTI, helping them turn around their business. And then I sort of wanted to retire, but then Martin Frost, the former CEO of CMR Surgical, was very convincing and got me to come and do a 6-month gig of helping him to get the commercial plan ready for launching their robot. And 6 months became 6 years, which was a surprise to me. And then after the 6 years, I commercialized the robot there. We sold over 100 robots in multiple countries. And I definitely then retired. And as you can see, I've retired by not retiring. And I've started the new company, which is How to Start Up in MedTech. And really what I want to do is just give a bit back to the community and really try and help young entrepreneurs or surgeons with ideas to get their MedTech startup to be lower than the attrition rate of 75%, which is normal. So that's it, really. That's my background.
Fantastic. Yeah. And I got to say, I really enjoyed the fact that you're starting to put out a lot of great content on LinkedIn, and I've really been enjoying it. So let's kind of start with like the first thing, which is maybe we, and I think this is where like you and I, we really hit it off, which is talking about what's wrong with not just surgical robotics, but like how we think about commercializing products in medtech. I can go on for a long time about this, but why don't you take your first shot at it, and we can kind of beat it up together.
Yeah. So I think there's two parts to that. I think that there's the commercialization in general. I think that a lot of companies are still stuck back in the 1990s, mid 1990s, just the way that they try and commercialize product. And I think that the world has really moved on a lot since then. Healthcare has moved on a lot since then. And then the second way is the way that the customers want to be sold to, I think, is changing radically as well. And it used to be very much the rep to surgeon sell was kind of one of the main ways of commercializing a product. And I think the level of complexity has gone up just so high in the last sort of 20 years that those old models that we relied on are just not as probably efficient as they could before. And then the final piece in that is that, we've gone through this whole digitalization of the boom of digitalization, and we had COVID, which changed the way also that we interacted with surgeons as businesses to surgeons. So I think there's just been some landslide changes, and I think the whole face of it has changed and is going to keep evolving as we go forward now.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think like, I always wonder, because for me, I started becoming more aware of this, I'd say around 2014, 2015, when Andrew Chen, who's the VP, who was the VP, he's now at Andreessen Horowitz, but he was the VP of growth at Uber. And he wrote this like seminal article called "The VP of Growth is the New VP of Marketing," and reading about how you use digital to drive adoption and scale and, growth campaigns and everything. And I just started thinking, I'm like, why aren't we doing that in our industry? I was like, physicians are no different than like a consumer, because they are consumers, right? And I was like, I built my career, and this is something I have to clarify on every other episode. People mistake me as being anti like in-person selling. I love in-person selling. I think if you're able to meet with somebody in person, there's a different energy. You can see body language. It's just different and better, including conferences. But there's got to be ways, just like we're telling our surgeons, hey, we're not telling you to completely change your procedure, but you're going to augment it using robotics, using AI, using different things. We should be augmenting our commercial processes using these channels. But for some reason, and I thought, Steve, that COVID would be the thing that changed it. Our industry it's almost like it doesn't have enough fear of the future to start changing. And so you talked about like the old model about rep to surgeon, and absolutely, at least I can speak for here in the US, it's become so much more complicated about how hospitals adopt technologies. When you think about transforming, a commercial team, right? Where does it all start?
Yeah. So I think it starts way back in the hiring process, the kind of people that you hire in. I think that there's a different generation that we need to bring in. So, you need a mix of people with a lot of experience, and you need some new blood to come into your teams. And I think it's the way that we interact with them in the company. So one of the things that I was really big on one of my companies in Citra, and then, I really phased this into CMR, is that go paperless within the company. That's one of the first things to do. If you can't be digital within your company, why do you expect a customer to be digital with you? That's one of the things that we had. So one of the things that at CMR is, we didn't do anything on paper, no paper brochures. There was no paper sent out. It was all done through technology, which was Showpad, which is a really good, if anyone's not seen Showpad, there's a few of them out there, but it's kind of it's a content manager for your business that pushes out to surgeons, and you can have interactions. You can actually have online live interactive meetings on it. So embedding that into the culture of the commercial team is critical from day one. And you can't be putting the show on outside that we're all digital outside, and to the customers, it's all about digital. And then inside, be analog inside. So I think you asked me where the first place to start it is the hiring, but then when you hire them in, you have to live and breathe the digital interaction, meetings digitally, not having everyone come into the office all the time, because you can't have two different cultures. You're either going to go to a digital native culture or you're not. So I think that's where you start with it.
And when it comes to the hiring side, like, do you feel that, incentives really drive the behavior of commercial teams? We talked about this, about, maybe the incentives are sort of aligned the wrong way. Can you talk about more about the incentives, like what the incentive structure should be?
Yeah, wow, that's a big question. So my personal feeling is that, and again, a lot of people have sort of shaken their head at this and said that, it doesn't work and it won't work and it won't ever work. But I'm against paying what I would say is commission for sales. I think that you put the customer and the salesperson at odds with each other, because my motivation is to make sure that you buy. And if you buy, then I get paid. And I think that instead, for me, the mindset that we need to get to is, when you interact with us as a company and use our products, you're incredibly satisfied. Excuse me. So if you're incredibly satisfied, I should be paid on your satisfaction. NPS scores, things like NPS scores, I think are a very good way of doing that. And it's not just if the surgeon buys, or is the hospital and the whole group of caregivers, are they satisfied and happy with what we've done?
Can you for my audience, I know what an NPS score, but can you expand? So it's Net Promoter Score. Yeah. Can you expand a little bit just on that? Like what is technically good, and why do we need to measure that?
Yeah, so Net Promoter Score is a system, and there's various ways of doing it, but the general methodology is that you look for people who are supporters and detractors and neutrals, and what you're trying to understand is how many people are avid supporters and will give you a score. So most people have done an NPS score in their life, when it says how well did we do out of 10, and it's a little bit more complex than just the score you get out of 10. This kind of above a certain score is a person who is a supporter and is going to actually go out there and support you. Then there's a score, which is a medium, and then there's a low, which is a detractor, which are people that are basically are not happy with what you do and will go out and talk bad about you. So there's a whole science behind NPS. And one of the key things of NPS is not the score, it's the motivation behind the score. So that's why I think it's a really, really good indicator also for the company, because if you run a good NPS system and you find out that you've got a lot of detractors, let's say you've got a region somewhere that's got a lot of detractors, you can use that scoring system to go in and really probe deeply and understand, well, what were the elements of what we're doing? And a good example might be that, the sales reps are doing really well, the product's doing really well, but our logistics in that area are just terrible. So it helps the company also to understand. So now you've got a reward system that helps the surgeon, helps the hospital, helps the rep to really understand what they're doing well on and not doing well on. And happy customers usually buy more. So that's, aligned to what they want them to do. And it also helps the company to really understand the sentiment of the customer so that they can, the company can make really good judgment calls when things are bad, but also when things are good. They can find things that are good and amplify them in other regions. So that's why I think it's important that we move away just from this very basic, you sell a system and you get X% of it. I think that is leaving so much on the table that the company, the customer, and the rep could really benefit from. So that's why I'm passionate about it, but it doesn't mean it's right.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Something that I always wondered, because at least, I'm most familiar with the U.S. market, and we'll use capital just as an example, because that's sort of my strong suit. Selling capital equipment is it's way harder today than it used to be. The timelines are really long, and so you have to get a very special salesperson who has pretty thick skin to manage that. On one side, I'm not anti-commission, but I feel like there's a better incentive, maybe called bonus structure,
yes,
to incentivize because a sales rep, if they're going to put in all that work, they want to make good money. I'm very pro paying salespeople a lot of money.
Absolutely.
But you said something earlier that I completely agree with, which is, selling a product is one side of it, but I really believe that customer success should be something that the salesperson owns. So that way it's not just, hey, I'm going to sell, I'm on to the next one. But I feel like the salesperson should be incentivized somehow through a bonus structure or something to work with customer and clinical success to make sure that those accounts are happy. How would you devise a compensation plan around that?
Yeah, and we actually did try and do that. Not that we did it too successfully, but we were trying to basically make it where
this is at CMR.
Yeah, where we were less reliant upon the bonus side of it. That was a smaller proportion of the salesperson's income, and instead, what we were doing was we were really trying to put more of the compensation onto their salary, onto their monthly salary. And the reason why I was doing that was that you are what you earn. And if you are earning very little salary and you have to do it all on commission, you're going to become much more of a aggressive risk taker, whether you like it or not. And it'll depend on the person, but you'll go out and try and push more because that's how you make sure you put bread on the table for your family. Whereas my theory was, if you could make sure that people were at the minimum very happy every month, that they could put bread on the table and they could pay their bills and they could get the medical insurance and they could have a respectable existence on the base, remove some of that pressure to make bad deals and incentivize people to make good deals where you measure the outcome of the deal later, and you make an incentive scheme which is much more salary based, and the bonus is really a behavioral based, not a result based. And again, with the behaviors in the bonus scheme, we were looking at things like leading indicators. Just let me unpack this a little bit, but a sales commission on a sale is terrible from the fact that it's a lagging indicator. You either sold it or you didn't. And you find that out at the end of the cycle. And as you just brilliantly said, the capital sales cycle has become so long and quite risky as well. Capital budgets can just disappear before you close the deal. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to make a behavioral bonus scheme where you reward the right actions, that if everything comes together and with a bit of luck, because there's always luck involved, you will end up with the sale. So, measure people on quality of calls. How many quality calls do they have with that hospital, that institution, that surgeon. Because if you have a number of quality calls, you're more likely to end up. Pay them for when they get people through certain milestones. So when you're selling a surgical robot, one of the most important things is that they end up with a demo. Well, incentivize them on how many demos you get done. Quality demos that get a good lab rating score. There's different ways that you can do it, and we tried different things in there. But I'm in favor of creating bonus schemes that are, first of all, predominantly leading indicators. I pay people on things that will eventually become the sales. There is definitely going to be a part of the sale in there, which is how well does the company do financially? And this you have to be careful, because revenue is a terrible thing to pay people on. Because if I bring in $100 revenue, but I spend $110 of the company's money to get it, I get paid my bonus. and the company gets dinged.
I'm laughing just because I just came back from JP Morgan, and I was literally telling this to somebody yesterday that one of the problems in our industry, and again, it worked. It was a model that worked the last few decades because, people were trying to get acquired and everything. I mean, people still are trying to get acquired, but just isn't. I don't feel like it's a good model these days, which is our industry is too focused on revenue and not net, and are actually profitable. And I did a post about, I have a lot of criticism of sales reps in our industry, but I was kind of beating up on the marketers where I said, look, there's a reason why sales reps don't respect marketing. Here are the reasons why. One of those reasons is I know it's hard because I run my own business, but I have even a metric in my own business where I can tell you more or less what does it cost for me to get an intro meeting with somebody, and what does it cost to essentially acquire a customer and close them for my courses, for my other offerings. You can't there's not a single medtech company out there that even has a clue of this. And I'm just how do you manage a budget to this? Right. And I think that, to your point, I mean, that's just the tip of the iceberg. The other side of it, both for sales and marketing, is to start thinking about what are the actual leading indicators that we're getting close to a deal being done? Because right now everybody's being judged and managed on lagging indicators. And I think that's where, between the incentive of, hey, you're going to make money when you close, and being judged on lagging indicators, then you have I don't want to call it bad behavior, but if that's the incentive structure, you're not going to put extra time thinking, is this the right hospital and right surgeon to sell to? You're just going to sell, and then you say that's going to be clinical's problem to figure out how do we and I feel like it's just a very bad incentive.
I completely agree, and I kind of termed that in the past as reps then become like butterflies. They go in, they get the nectar from the flower, they move on, and they go to the next flower, and they go, they sequentially go around the flowers.
Great analogy. I haven't heard it like that before.
And instead, you want this, even if it's the commercial team that's doing the deal, there's potentially a second deal in the future, and you want that every deal that you have as a company, you want it to be a good deal where the customer enjoyed buying from you. And I know that's a weird thing for some people to hear, but we really, I've been focused on this for the last almost 10 years, where the customer wants to buy from you. It's not that you want to sell to them. And when you can get into that frame, there is then a long lasting, respectful relationship between you and the customer. And I'm not for a minute saying that there's not brilliant reps out there who don't do that so naturally. There's lots that do that in such a natural way. They're gifted. But I think it's not, what you were saying is it's not systematic within the companies, because they don't measure the right KPIs. They don't measure the right indicators. They don't measure the right leading indicators. And as you're getting, especially in capital, to that sort of moment of intensity of trying to get the deal over the line, there's just a boatload of work that happens. And if you set up your systems in the right way to, first of all, have the right number of those events happen, measure those events and the success of those events that lead to the sale, and then pay upon that, the logic is that it will just drive not only the sale, but it'll also drive the behavior of the sale in a way that you will create a lasting, really good sentiment between you and the customer. And that has to, A, create some customer loyalty, and B, the next time you do a deal, it will make it so much easier the next time you go in, because that trust level will be gone, and they'll say, hey, we enjoyed buying a machine off them, and hey, let's just run that same thing again because it was nice and it wasn't painful, and we felt like we won, they won, everyone won. So I think you're right. I think that's where we need to, in my mind, get to as an industry.
Yeah, and I wonder, like, going back to the incentive structures, like, I like the idea of paying on leading indicators, and like one of those things is like, top of funnel activity, like demos and everything. And I always tell people, even early on, pack your pipeline, because there's some, I'm going to use a random example, like a Hopkins. Hopkins is probably not going to be a deal that closes within a normal sales timeline, but you put them into pipeline, you nurture them over time, right? The other side of it is that with how difficult it is to market on social media these days, I feel like the most valuable asset that marketing has is a sales team. And I think that they should be incentivized in some way to take and proliferate, company content, but also create their own content so that they get in front of, more physicians are on LinkedIn and Twitter. And that way the salesperson can show, even just by posting, like there's Vendela Martin is somebody who's just really blown up. She's gone through my program and she's done so well. She creates a lot of content for gynecologists, and a lot of it is clinical content, showing papers and everything. But she's done that so well in the last few months that these gynecologists now actually tag her in their clinical posts because they see her like a peer, right?
Yeah.
That's done
been watching
for their company, right?
Yeah.
And so
I've been watching her actually, and it's come up on my feed a lot. So yeah, you're absolutely right on that.
Yeah, and I think like if you have a sales team of 3 or 4 people like that, that I think establishes a lot of brand and product awareness with the customer, and then you at least elevate yourself to a closer level to the customer, so that you look like a true clinical advisor. Because everybody likes this quote unquote consultative sale, but nobody wants to have a meeting with somebody who's just going to be consulting on just their product, because that's not, there's no value. I want to put a number to this. So let's pretend we start a surgical robotics company, okay? Yep. And let's say we've raised like something. I mean, to be successful as a robotics company, we both know you got to raise a lot of money, like hundreds of millions. But let's just say we've raised a solid $30 million as Series A. We're going to hire, let's say, 5 to 6 sales reps who are going to sell the capital. Let's start with the salary. What would be the base salary? And for those who don't know, let's talk about what that base salary is normally today, and then what would you put it at, so that way they feel good and they're a little bit of pressure is off, first of all, because I think that's the main thing, is establishing, can they pay their bills, can they feel like safe, right, to avoid that bad behavior.
I'll give you some European numbers that I know very well.
Yeah, sure.
So and it depends on the country and it depends on the social system as well. But basically, a lot of reps out there today a junior rep would start on sort of 40,000 euros as a base. And that's peanuts, right?
Yeah.
And a very senior rep would be up in more like the 100, 110, 115K. So that's kind of the base ranges that you'll see across the countries. And then there'll be bonus schemes where you could earn probably 50% of your salary, again, in bonuses on top of that. The problem with the surgical robotics is, and I'll keep trying to explain this to everybody, because until you've done it, the soft tissue surgical robotics is, I said this to Joe Mullings the other night, it's not that it's a different league, it's a completely different sport. You are trying to sell capital, disposable, semi-disposable, camera systems, energy instrument systems. You're trying to sell service, the whole thing. It's just got everything that's difficult to sell in medtech. You're trying to sell that as a complete thing for a 7-year deal, $7 million deployed over a 7-year deal. These are huge capital investments. You need all of the surgeons involved. You need all of the C-suite involved. You need to be, you can do over 500 touch points to get a surgical robot sold. That means emails, calls, demos, case visits, taking them to see other people. You end up with over 500 touch points to get a deal across. And you're not guaranteed to get it and win it. The professionalism, the knowledge that you need to do that is extreme. And to think that you're going to pay somebody 40 or 50,000 euros to have the skill set, the ability, the tenacity, the ability to manage that project is bizarre. So instead, you're going to be on the, I think you're going to be up in the 150s, and you've got to allow them the time to mature those deals, because it may be 18 months to 2 years before they see their first commission check.
100%. And it's funny. That's exactly the number I was thinking, because I'm in California. It costs a lot of money to live here. But I was thinking, what's a decent salary that you can live in California or live pretty well anywhere else? I think 150 is perfectly good. If you want to adjust that based on state, 125 to 150. And then for them to get paid on leading indicators. So like, let's say demos, different things. So that way, if you because this happens, I'm sure you went through this yourself. I've had worked with sales teams where there's a sales rep who worked the territory, got leads in, demoed people, like everything right, but for various reasons wasn't able to close, and some of it was not their fault.
Yeah,
they end up leaving, but they weren't compensated for all this work that they had done, right? And a lot of times, with the sort of sad part is that, like, sometimes these hospitals, they need a certain timeline.
Yep.
And then they leave, and then somebody else comes in, and of, let's say, the 6 deals that they're working, one of them ends up closing with a new rep, And so for things like that, I feel like you should be compensated for your development of a market, your awareness, all these different things. But the other side of it is, I think if people are, I would say, it's almost like the reverse of what U.S. Surgical did back in the day. So U.S. Surgical was like 100% commission. And if you weren't like, hitting your numbers, you were just fired. I think on this side, it's like you're paid very well, but if you don't have good leading indicators, right, that you're developing a market, that you just cut, right? And for me, I've gone to bat as a head of marketing for certain reps where they hadn't closed deals, but I would like talk to a CEO or the VP of sales and say, hey, like, here's my 2 cents as to why I like this rep. Yes, they haven't closed any deals, but like, they brought in good demos. They help proliferate company content. They've helped develop their market, right? So I think as the deals have got more complex, the way we score these reps should be more complex as well. At the end of the day, yes, you got to close deals, but it's a little bit more complicated, right?
Yeah. So there's a phrase that I have for this, which is people become brand ambassadors. And, we sometimes need to pay people to be brand ambassadors. That can be as important, by the way, because, I've seen, especially with surgical robotics, I've seen brand ambassadors who've been able to help close deals on the other side of the planet because of the work that they've done in their territory. But unfortunately, the charity that was going to give the money for the robot they were going to sell doesn't come through. They can't sell. What do? We fire that person who helped build the brand really well. It's crazy. It's madness. It's also, it's stupid for the company. So I think that we have to change on these things. And again, it depends on the product, right? It depends whether it's a very low light level consumable cell or whether it's a very complex capital cell and there's a spectrum in between. I think there's something that's going to change a little bit. And we definitely saw this, is that as you go up that level of complexity, it becomes less and less a one-person sales show. And it's something I talk about a lot, which is if you're trying to sell this robot, you're going to have your IT team in there who are going to be doing as much selling as you as the sales rep, because they've got to convince the IT officer in the hospital to plug your system into its network. And and you've been through it. It's just not that easy to get them to start putting data back and forth and letting the data go out of the hospital. You'll have to take in their sterilization teams. When you're dealing with a product that's got a really specialistic sterilization cycle, you're going to have your experts from your company go in and sell the sterilization staff that we're going to make their lives miserable for a while for the benefit of the patients. There's a whole host of things and I think that where we got and where I think the future lies is that you're going to end up with two roles and two teams. Not for every product. Some will be more the way it is today. But I think the way that it's going to evolve is that you'll have one team who is the commercial team, and it will be a team approach. And you won't have that this is so-and-so's rep's hospital. I think that's going to go away as well. And I'll tell you why that's good for the company. But what you'll end up is having a hit team who goes in almost like a key account management team that goes in and works these accounts, because there's so much heavy lifting. You can't do it on your own anyway. And sometimes you've got to go in and have at least 2 or 3 of you as experts in the meeting. So I think that's going to be a slight change. We're going to see more and more as deal flow gets more complex and the number of hoops you have to get through become more complex. It's already complex enough with VAT committees and all that kind of stuff. Where I think it's going to go is that there's going to be the teams that do the selling. And then we'll talk in a little bit more about the massive value that reps bring today in many, many places is their presence in the OR and the support they make in the OR.
100%. It's kind of a good segue. I wonder what you think about. So again, if I look at the SaaS world, and like for this show, like one of my sponsors, Claire, there's revenue intelligence software for Salesforce, great company.
Yeah.
When you look at the SaaS world, there's no such thing as just like one sales rep. Like they have an SDR, BDR team for outreach. They have the account executive who manages things. A lot of times you have a sales engineer who helps with the demo.
Yep.
On rare occasion, you have somebody else with the closing. Usually the AE takes care of all that, but you have a team. And I'm wondering if, since these deals have become so complicated, because like your average capital salesperson is on one side managing an existing deal, which means like trying to get ahead of like, getting them to a surgeons to a lab, working with the VAC committee, all these different things. And at the same time, they're having a prospect and build pipeline for future quarters. It's just too many things. Yeah. I wonder if, as you divide this out so that selling becomes more of a team sport, do you also incentivize the bonus structure? So it's like the team gets, we talked about this a while back, but can you kind of unpack that a little bit? Because I'm very much in favor of that.
Yeah, I'm very much in for team rewards as well. And again, it has to be blended. There has to be part of it where you own your own responsibilities and you get rewarded on your own responsibilities.
There has to be an owner for it. That's 100%.
But I think a percentage of it, 30%, let's say, should be on the way that you as a team work and the team pulls it off together. Because I think it would be hard to go in and dissect, especially on something as complex as, say, a surgical robot, to go in and actually go in and say, this person contributed 22.1% to the closure of that sale is just a nonsense. So you got to either be binary, right? You either pay one person for the whole sale, or you have to somehow pay the team in a way that they have some kind of pooled team bonus. It's difficult to do, and these things are sometimes hard also for the teams to understand. But what I think you need to get to is that the whole team wins. I don't want to use sports analogies too much because I don't not too big on sports analogies and stuff. But basically, teams get bonuses when they go into tournaments, and then they get a team. But it's not the person who scores the goal. It's the team gets the bonus as well. The individual, if you're, a soccer player who is knocking in loads of goals, you'll get personal reward because your personal salary and your value in the marketplace will also shoot up dramatically because everyone will want you as a striker. But the teams basically get incentivized together. And I think it also creates good team morale. Nobody left behind. You don't leave people behind. I saw that definitely in the selling of the surgical robots. The team approach kind of worked on that. And you did say something, and again, I do want to reiterate that as well for your listeners, is that today, the complexity to get some of these big deals through is just too much for one person to do, just from a stress point of view, just trying to actually manage all of these things. And I don't care how much of a superhero you think you are, me included. I can't keep it all in my head. I can't keep it all in my diary. And I would in a minute like to come back and talk about Salesforce as well.
Oh, let's do that next. 100%. And now just to kind of segue that in, look, for me, I like to think I'm pretty good at what I do. Mainly because I use automation, I use tools and everything. Even as a small business, I use a CRM. I don't use Salesforce. I use HubSpot. Yeah. But I actually have a salesperson helping me because managing these deals are complicated. As you solve more expensive problems, it requires more meetings. If people are going to pay you more money, I would love to be so good that I have like one call closes, but that just doesn't usually happen. And so a lot of times, I need help. I need help. And so I have a sales guy who helps me with following up with deals and making sure that they're on track to close. And then also evaluating who's the right fit now. So again, I think to your point, you can't do all this in your head. And I think that a lot of these, personally, the salespeople are going to love this. If you're going to expect somebody to do all of this, which is they're going to prospect, they're going to find deals, they're going to manage all this, like they should be salaried at like 250, 300 base, like if you're going to expect it. And not to mention, because I don't think we talk about this enough in our industry, and you and I, having starting our own gigs, we just talked about this now, that the impact on your physical and mental health of traveling and being on the road and sleeping hotels, not to mention a lot of these people have families, like, you're not compensated for that, right? So like all of this, like, okay, if you want one person to do that, you should be paid a lot of money, So, but let's talk about Salesforce and CRMs.
Yeah. So I'm a massive fan, and anyone who's worked with me knows I'm a huge fan of data and systemizing things. I think that Salesforce is, and again, I'll talk about this. I love it and I hate it, because I hate it in the fact that I just think it's very expensive, and it's just really, really. But for me it's the best. At the CRMs, and everyone's got their own flavor of the CRMs. But it's only good if it's used right. If the data going in is bad, then the data coming out is bad. If the way that your CRM is set up to get your funnel flow, and we talked a little about funnels just before the call, if your funnel flow is not right, you won't get the right amount coming out of the back end of the funnel. And then in these super complex deals, you need to get Salesforce to almost do the stepwise progression for you, so that you can monitor and measure your progress in the right way. So that coming full loop to the leading indicators, you need to set up Salesforce in a way that it measures those leading indicators automatically and spits out the data automatically, and then ties that into the bonus schemes automatically. But I think anyone who's not running a CRM at the minute in their business is crazy. You're secondary crazy if you're paying for a CRM and then using it badly. I think that's probably even a worse sin. And having, all this information in people's heads, very difficult to do. Or scraps of notebooks. That's another place where people tend to hide all this stuff. Or even worse, having it all on Excel sheets on their own personal laptops, trying to run their business that way through their own made up Excel sheets. There's so many things there that are just waiting to go wrong if that happens. And one of them is that if somebody leaves the company, and that happens, we get rep turnover, all the days have got to disappear where the rep owns the relationship, the data, the knowledge, and therefore the fate of the company. Because if that rep ups and leaves and gets a better job in somewhere else, you can literally kill a region or even a company when those things happen en masse. So I think it's just wise for the companies to do it.
Oh, 100%. And I think like this is the other thing, again, when you're not a venture-backed company, right? Like us, you're a small business. What's most important is cash flow and profitability, but also the other idea is you don't want to start things net new. Like when you do a lot of net new things, whether it's an engagement, a product, or even deals, like there's not enough energy for that. And so even for me, like, I use HubSpot just because that's what I need. But for companies who are, I tell them, invest in Salesforce, and then on top of it, get Clary, because I think everybody has an idea of what Salesforce should be, and then you realize it's not. And Clary just kind of automates all of that, automates the data go in, pulls predictive revenue insights. But to your point, I'll give you a small example. Again, I'm not working multi-million-dollar deals in my CRM. But it helps a lot when we look to see how we're going to hit like a revenue goal for the quarter. Yeah. And we say, oh, we'll look at this deal and we can see the historic engagement. We use Firefly for AI notes. And so we can see everything about that deal. So my sales guy, without talking to me, knows exactly what the context is, who he spoke to, where everything was, and then pick back up and move them into an active part of the pipeline. I think you're absolutely right, because a lot of times, you can lose if you're lucky, conservative, a quarter or two of just like getting back up to speed, because when a rep leaves and you put somebody else in, okay, that's, let's say minimum going to take 2-3 months. Then it's going to take 2 to 3 months for that person to get up to speed. And then God forbid, if they don't have any of this data being captured, it's like, they can spend, and this is like, I think the fear. A rep can spend like a month or two chasing an account, only to realize, oh, no matter what we do, we are not selling into this account, and then they're essentially publicly whipped at like a deal rip, you know, for chasing a deal. And they can't say like, well, the reason why I chase a deal is because nobody told me that, you know, these circumstances exist, right?
That is a brilliant example. This just, you don't know what you don't know. Well, actually, if you get it all in a CRM, you do know what you do know, because the data is there and you can mine it. And not only can you mine it, you can actually make sense out of it. You know, there are some really good systems out there that also just make sense of that data. You know, Salesforce has got Einstein, which is still not that great, but there are other systems out there that can help you to mine that. So when you do a territory handover, for example, you should be able to just hand over a full file report that's been dragged from that data that says, these are the things, these are the hot deals, this is where you should go, these are the insights and intelligence, so that you can get to managing that business way faster. And the one that you say is just brilliant, because that's the hardest thing for reps to deal with or to understand, is what you got to say no to. It just has a big red list that says, do not go here. The data is clear. This is a graveyard for you. You're not going to sell here. No matter how much you think, just stay away from it and invest your time on these 5 green accounts at the top. CRMs are completely capable of doing that today. And I just think that 99% of companies don't enforce the behavior in their teams to put the right data in. Then they don't enforce their behavior in their marketing teams to utilize it correctly. And then we just, we're so busy being busy, we then forget to even pull the reports off and just hand it to the new rep and say, oh, by the way, this might just help you in your first 3 months.
Yeah, no, complete 100%. And we're going through a transition period, I think, because I think like we're seeing a very painful transition of like, and I'm every few episodes I say something that's going to piss people off, but it's just true, which is the traditional VP of sales, right? From let's say 10, 20 years ago was somebody who, I don't know, let's just say it's in cardiac, right? They spend 10 years, 20 years, whatever, in cardiac. So they have their like Rolodex, their list of customers, they have like tribal knowledge of it. Then they go hire their buddies, which is fine. I mean, I'm not opposed to that, but they hire the people that they're used to working with who have their own biases, right? And rather than using data, they have these assumptions of who they should go sell to. Okay. And then it would work, but that was a much more simpler selling environment. These days it's not. And so as the saying goes, the fish stinks from the head. Yeah. And so a lot of VPs of sales, they have not received enough pressure to understand and get better about this. So like, I mean, look, if I go do a poll, I should probably do this somehow, but if I go talk to most VP of sales and I ask them like, what do you think are some leading indicators of a deal? I don't think they'll have an answer. Like, even if they don't have it, as a list, I don't think they'll be able to think of it. Yeah. And that's a problem because that sets the tone and the behavior for the rest of the sales team. Yeah. And so if the leader is not prioritizing certain things, right? Let's say whether it's being a brand ambassador and proliferating content, managing data and everything, then the rep adopts the same behavior. And then what ends up happening, at least this is in the startup level, is these things are only important at the end of the quarter when you're about to have a board meeting. And then the head of sales goes to marketing and says, hey, we're having a board meeting. Can you help me like pull some data from the CRM or pull some data? We need to make a slide. And they make a slide and it's more like reporting the weather versus like actually talking about, objectively. Yeah, insights, exactly. 100%. Yeah.
I think that's a phenomenon. And again, part of this is also generational. We talk about this, that, the people who are in those positions at the top of the organization it may well have worked for them when they were in the positions that they're managing. And I think the thing that everyone's got to understand now is the rate of change is phenomenal. What was valid 10 years ago is certainly not valid today. I think what was valid last year may not be valid today. And I think that what we've got to do is we've got to find, people have got to start becoming more adaptive. And the only way that you can do that is data. And as you say, if it's just a weather report that just is just to literally placate somebody so that they've seen a graph, that's not going to help in this rapidly changing environment where you're trying to look for nuances and nuanced signals that will tell you the state of things that are changing. I think that what we need to do as well is on the marketing side of it as well. I think their role is changing. It's not just about the push. A huge piece of it is the analysis behind it, so that when they create the assets or they create the messaging or they create the programs that they want the commercial team to follow, it's data driven and data based, not just the biased base, because this is what we did when I was at my last company. That's going to be a big change.
100%. And I guess let's take turns beating up on marketing now. So like my thing with marketing is too much of it is, I think we've sort of perpetuated a problem or a persona in our industry where marketing by most reps is looked at as, oh, that's the service organization to sales. And so I go and those people do work for me or they create things, versus like, as an example, I think one of the more better examples of like a marketing led organization was Intuitive in the 2000s, right? Yeah. Marketing used data and they're very clear as to this is the message, this is who you're going to target, here's what you're going to do, so on and so forth, right? But they weren't a service organization to sales. I think too many marketers become that. And now you're just doing arts and crafts for sales where you're spending money and doing things just to satisfy sales and not actually using data to drive things. And I think that on the CRM side, this is something that marketing, should own, but in conjunction with sales, versus I think a lot of times what happens is that marketing owns a CRM and they're kind of coming down from the ivory tower and beating up on sales like, oh, get your Salesforce data in, et cetera. And no sales rep in our industry ever said, "Hey, I made President's Club because Salesforce." That just doesn't happen, Yeah.
So I won't beat up on marketing too much because I was also in charge of marketing, and I think this is an important thing. When you put the marketing and the sales under the same person, you end up with a better synergy. And I was
they can't,
Yeah, they can, and it is right, and also it's the people. So I was just absolutely privileged to work with the head of marketing at CMR, which is a guy called Patrick Portage, who is a wonderful guy and just really, really good at what he does. And I think that we managed to find a good balance there between the commercial team who was out in the field and the marketing. But there was still a lot of, can you make me this presentation? Can you make me this asset? Can you do this? Can you do that? That has to go away for sure.
Yeah. And there's some element to that is okay. Like marketing should be one controlling like, oh, we're going to make an asset, like that comes from us. Like you don't want reps putting together stuff.
No. You got to be the brand police for sure. And the marketing has to be the brand police for sure.
Yeah. I'm wondering, like for a new startup, and again, let's just say they've raised money, et cetera. What's your sort of go-to technology stack of tools? You mentioned Showpad, you mentioned Salesforce, but if you had like a basic tech stack, what does that look like and why?
Yeah, so Showpad sits there for sure. Believe it or not, one of the main things. My family's just coming back in, so I'm just waving to my family here. They're back from the voyage out. So you asked me what's the tech stack that I would have. Well, the first thing is I'd make sure that everyone's got a Showpad. So they've got an iPad with a Showpad on it. I would definitely have Salesforce early on. And people say, my God, that just seems so early to have Salesforce. The day you start collecting the first leads of surgeons who are helping you with the product development should be in your Salesforce, not just, who you're going to go and sell to. Then you have in that stack, I think once you've got those two things, Showpad helps a lot on that because it's got such integration. But the other stack that's in there for me is really it's WhatsApp. This is going to sound bizarre because a lot of people don't want to use WhatsApp. So many surgeon communities are on WhatsApp, and I was like so against it. But you need some kind of tool where you can communicate with the surgeons or the community in the way that they want to communicate, and asking them to jump on Teams meetings, which is a great tool within the company. Don't get me wrong. The Microsoft Teams suite within the company is great. But if you've got a group of knee surgeons who are all, called like the Rochester Knee Group, who are on a WhatsApp Rochester Knee Group thing, you've got to have that in your armament, right? And you got to somehow work out how you use that within your company in a professional way. But WhatsApp is definitely up there as there's so many surgeons who just want to communicate with me on WhatsApp and nothing else.
Yeah, and I think it's really important too, just to understand like where where are our customers spending time and communicating? It's like WhatsApp groups was one thing. Facebook groups used to be there, but it's not what it used to be. But definitely, like at least on the orthopedic side, like LinkedIn and just public posting and clinical stuff on LinkedIn is it's kind of big.
Yeah, huge.
And I think finding ways to take advantage of that is really key. And I know I tell companies like, look, like I'm not saying don't go to a conference, but like maybe instead of spending an extra 5 or 10K on like putting your logo on a room key card, maybe spend 5 or 10K on, a targeted Twitter campaign when they're at the conference, because they're jumping on Twitter and tweeting anyway.
Yeah.
So like little things like that. I definitely agree with Showpad. I think Showpad is a great technology. I really like it a lot. It depends on the stage of company. For me, like I'm pretty early stage. So before we do Salesforce, I always just say for marketing automation, I love HubSpot, but I think that you can get some early data there for sales and transfer it to Salesforce. Yeah. Once you do get Salesforce, and again, I'm biased because yes, they're a sponsor of the show, but I took them just because I really like their technology. But I feel like Clary is almost insurance for every Salesforce, and I should connect you with them as well.
Yeah,
I just love the fact that what Clary does is that it really helps automate the data entry going into Salesforce, and then it helps create like predictable insights as to like which deals you should focus on, et cetera. And then the benefit about that is that you have good data being automated going in, and then you have revenue collaboration between sales and marketing where you can objectively say, hey, here are the deals that actually, based on our insights and data says that we should focus more on. Let's put more resources behind those. And it's more of a discussion versus, again, most sales deal rips and deal discussions are kind of like reporting the weather. And it's like subjective. Oh, I had a good conversation with these guys and we're going to talk. It's like, okay, cool. Like, hey, we're like, keep us posted on that, Jessica. Let us know, let us know what you need. It's like, all right, great. Like a month late, and it's just,
it's not the insights that you need to run a business. You're right. I think you mentioned this thing about the data going in. I think it's probably more important than people realize. You can analyze a lot of stuff out of things like CRMs, but if your quality of your data going into it is just garbage, it is garbage in, garbage out. You're doing really good number crunching analysis on garbage. So if companies like that can help people to get sensible, good quality data in, and then through the funnel start trying to prospect out and say, this data here indicates that this deal set here is going to be better. Yeah, I mean, people should be all over that all day long.
I'm wondering, the other thing I wanted to ask you about and see what your thoughts are, like on databases. For me, like I'm a big Alpha Sophia user. One, because they're mainly focused on startups. They have good data, and it's $300 a month. So I feel like it's a great starting point to use. Later on, and when you have the money, you can upgrade. I won't mention the platforms' names because I don't want to say anything bad about it. But there are other platforms which are good. They just cost a lot of money, and they're sometimes a little clunky to use. But I'm wondering on the databases, there's a variety of procedure databases. Like, do you have a preference of any? What's your take on them?
So we've used things like Clarivate before and things like that. There's several in Europe that we've used. I think the US has some of the better data for everything I've seen, just because of the way that your healthcare system's set up and the insurance system's set up there, and it's kind of incentivized to have better data, and because of the payments, the whole way that the payment schemes work. As you get to more socialized systems, the data that's in there gets a little bit more iffy, and as you go further south in Europe, it gets worse and worse. I think that everybody should at least go and buy some data report, and it doesn't have to be super up to date, by the way.
I agree. I agree with that. Tell me why you think that.
I think because you're looking for macro trends, right? So let's say I'm selling a gynae product for benign gynecology. I'm going to want to know the procedure place of where are the gynecologists, number one, where do they do the caseload, where are the cases that I really care about. So let's say I do something for sacral colpopexy. I'm going to want to know where they are and where the hot spots are for that. From a macro point as a company, I want to know, as I'm setting out my commercial strategy, which regions do I want to go first? Because I can't deploy everywhere. I'm a startup. I can't deploy everywhere at once. You just don't have the resources to do that. So let's say that, and I use the good old example of Florida. You see that in southern Florida, there's just a real hotspot for sacred colpopexy because the aging population, et cetera, et cetera. That is very useful information. That gives you big strategic indicators really early on where you should be going and deploying your initial sales teams or your initial marketing teams, or coming back to what you were saying before, maybe that's the place that you go and do some kind of dark campaign. And if your readers don't know what dark campaigns are, these are campaigns that are kind of like in the background in terms of you set these things off in the background so that you might have a hotspot somewhere in, say, Florida, where dripped in information is getting surgeons into the pipe. They don't realize that you're in there selling a product. So it's not an on the nose super light that, here's my suture tacker. It's much more subtle than that gets them aware. And I think that if you have these databases, it can really help you to target and use your dollars, your valuable dollars, in a much more targeted way.
Yeah, and I think I'm happy you mentioned that about like sort of dark campaigns, like at least what I think about for that is, our industry, if you think about a funnel, they're very focused more towards bottom funnel where you talk about the product. The problem is that with the funnel is that when you get closer to the bottom, like it becomes less and less people versus going up funnel and focusing on, let's say, marketing. And this is, I have a bias towards this, but when you get very good about marketing, talking about and thought leading around the problem, right, then you attract a lot more people. And then through that process, then they start figuring out like, oh, this company solves this problem via this solution. Yeah. And that solution happens to be this product they have. Yeah. And I think that you end up getting a lot more at bats because, all I do in my career is startups, and I've been doing it a little close to 12 years. So it's not as, I don't have as long of a career as you, but even for me, if you pick the specialty that I'm most familiar with, I can't pinpoint who the right adopters are. Like you can have a hypothesis, but at the end of the day, you have to just have a lot of like shots on goal, sports analogy. Yep. And then you see, because you tell me, in my experience, the best early adopters who adopt a product, inform the product, proliferate its adoption, it's never the people who you think it is. It's always somebody you don't know about. Yeah, all the time.
Completely agree. And again, I think that's why in the modern age, you didn't have the capability to do this, but you couldn't go out and fly an aircraft over Miami and just litter drop paper brochures out of the aircraft and hope that someone picks up something. You just couldn't do that, right? Yeah. You literally can do that sort of thing though now with social media, because what you can do is you can go wide at the top of the funnel and you can try and go on messages that resonate wider. Okay. And then you try and bring that next layer in. And then you get messages that resonate closer in and closer in. And hopefully what you're doing is you're bringing in the right people that you're not made assumptions about, because you can't always make assumptions about who's going to end up at the bottom of the funnel. But what you can do is you can set up filter racks throughout the funnel to try and guide the right people. And then eventually, as you say, you start with problem, ways that the problem could be solved, best way the problem could be solved. Here's my product. And if you do that right in marketing, I call it, and a lot of people have called it this, which is you're trying to create two things. And Patrick was always good at saying this, but it was about marketing's job in that sense is to try and create that market pull. You've got the people saying, I need something to fix the problem. And I have that problem and I need to fix that problem. And the next piece of the market pull is, I'm hearing about this company XYZ, and company XYZ sounds interesting, but I don't know enough about them. And then when the sales team gets on the ground and knocks on the door and says, hey, we're from XYZ, the door just gets opened easier. So marketing is a lot about, getting that market pull so that it's easier for the sales team to open the door to get in and have those conversations. And Patrick was just a master of doing that in his role.
Yeah, and I'm happy. I'm happy you mentioned that. And again, like I always tell companies this because when I mention like using some, they spend a lot of we spend a lot of money on certain pieces of content like a video, and then what people don't take into account is the money that it takes to distribute that. Like distribution is really everything. And so I tell them like, look, for anybody who's Instagram, I mean, it's a great place to buy stuff. But, for a $40 decision, so that I was looking for a certain piece of workout equipment for a $40 decision. This company, I looked at their content and stuff. They retargeted me on Instagram. I saw something else on Twitter. And so there's all this stuff that they made sure to stay in front of me for a period of 2 or 3 weeks before I ended up buying. That's a $40 decision. And so when you look at it like that, a lot of these devices are tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of decision where it involves a whole lot of other people. And we don't take into account the fact that, that's going to require staying in front of these people in a variety of avenues and ways, because it's a more complicated decision and it involves more money, And so I think that, see, your family came in, my kid got a hold of something like banging pots together.
It's good. It's good. I like it.
Yeah, no, it makes the podcast way more realistic.
Exactly.
People feel like they're actually hanging out with us.
Yeah.
But I just think that a more, just to kind of if we put a sort of a summary on our discussion.
Yep.
A more sophisticated and complex buying process requires a more sophisticated and complex, maybe not a complex, just a more sophisticated approach of how do you sell and drive customer success.
2024 and beyond, this is just going to get more and more, it's going to go this way. And I think that my recommendation to everybody who's out there is whatever you think was working 5 years ago, it ain't working now, and it's certainly not going to work tomorrow. So I think people have got to change. And again, people should definitely listen to a lot of the stuff that you put on LinkedIn. And I know that some people will sit there and shake their heads and say, oh, I just don't agree with this. I think people are just going to start being way more open-minded. We've got to start having these conversations, because our industry, I compare it to some other industries. We're so far behind on this. We are so far behind. And it's really on us as an industry to change it and do it and accept it and be more open to these things. And that's the only way that we're going to be able to, as complexity goes up and up and up, and it's only going to get more and more complex as we go out there to sell. And as companies, the only way we're going to be successful is if we adapt with that and we bring in the right tools at the right time with the right messaging and the right way. And it's just going to be very different than it was 12 months ago. So I'm looking forward to it, but I'll be interested to see how many people do adapt to it.
No, 100%. Well, and I appreciate the fact you're putting out content. I think, there are going to be some messengers like yourself, me, that, will push this. And I think over time, people start to change behavior. I'll tell you, tactically, one of the things that I've kind of figured out is that certain thing our industry does, I think a great way to make sure that people stop doing something is if you just make fun of it more. So I just personally feel like if I make fun of the idea, of spending thousands of dollars to put your logo on a room key card or something, if I just make fun of something long enough, people are going to just be like, yeah, we better not do this because we don't want to get made fun of. I think that's
too embarrassing.
Yeah, no, totally. Well, Steve, thank you so much for coming on the show. I know you're definitely going to be back on many times, but just to kind of wrap things up, this is the first time you've been on my show. And so I always like to do sort of a rapid fire question, just kind of some fun questions to ask guests.
Okay.
You can take as long as you want on these questions or as short as you want, and we moved on to the next question. You ready?
Okay.
Okay, perfect. So in our industry, I think continuing education is a big, big thing. In your career, what has been a book that sort of influenced your leadership style, marketing style, whether it's a marketing book, a leadership book, et cetera? What's a book you feel like you recommend or gift most often to other professionals?
Yeah, the one that I recommend the most is it's the book After Steve Jobs. That's the one I've been recommending really lately, because I think that's a really, really important book about how you take an industry and how a leadership team transitions and what happens after the person who made it as a founder disappears. Really interesting.
I totally agree. I love that book. I just I always recommend people for those biographies to listen to them. So I just finished it a few weeks ago. Yeah. If you haven't, have you listened or read Elon Musk's The One by Isaacson?
Just ordered it now. Literally got that.
You're gonna love it. Oh, it's so good. We'll when you finish it, let me know. That one's a wild one. But yeah, I 100% agree. So that's a great recommendation. Next recommendation for you is when Steve Bell goes and, let's say, not now because you've transitioned into a new life, but in your previous life, when you were a chief commercial officer or VP of marketing, what was the one tool that when you started a company, you're like, we need to start with this? What was the one thing that you needed to start with?
Oh yeah, it's Showpad. It's now, oh my God, what word? I mean, I was one of their first clients. I don't think you can live without a tool like that anymore. I just don't think you can do sales and marketing without this kind of digital asset management thing such as Showpad. I think it's brochures are dead.
Perfect. Couple more questions for you. What was the most painful thing that a mentor, a boss, somebody told you in your career, in your life, that changed you for the better?
Well, I get told a lot of painful things, or quite often. You know, one of the things that sticks out to me, and there are many, but one of the pieces of advice that was given, there was a gentleman called Walter Hack in J&J, and he was an amazing guy, but he was tough. He was a Swiss guy, and he was really tough. And I can remember being in a presentation, and I put up a presentation, and there was a number in it, like was a sales forecast of 121,554, which was obviously formulaic, right? And this guy in front of like 100 people just absolutely ripped me and told me to get off the stage. And that was one of the toughest things. I was only young. I was only probably about 23 at the time. But that then stuck with me and made me understand, think about what the hell you're putting up on your slides and make sure that it's got a logic and a ration and a reason to it. It ain't just formulaic. And that has stuck with me throughout my entire career. That I try not to do things in a formulaic way. I try to really think about them, analyze them. And if I'm going to put something on a slide, it better have a damn good reason why it's up there.
Yeah, and I think that was actually a big thing also from the Steve Jobs book, which was just like to be able to like talk through things. I think even Jeff Bezos, his thing is like he likes people to write memos, distribute them at a meeting, like so you can actually discuss and think through. I think that's a big thing in marketing, which I think that there's this tendency just to throw stuff up on a slide and not putting a lot of thought as to, okay, if I'm going to make somebody pay attention to something, why am I having them look here, right? Yeah. No, I love that. Okay, perfect. And then last one, this is more of a fun one.
Yep.
I asked this during COVID, but I think like one of the things, I don't know about you and your family, but something that happened to me from COVID is I got used to like Amazon boxes, and now it's like a thing, like I order things and I kind of like, it's a good feeling. What's a cool product that you ordered from Amazon in the last couple of years? It could be anything.
Yeah, it actually didn't come through Amazon.
Okay, yeah,
but it's an Amazon product that will be on Amazon. So it's a product called Shelfie, right? And I got this about 2 months ago, and it was a Kickstarter thing. And what this is it's a little box that uses a light system and a filter, and you put it in your fridge. And what it does is it massively down regulates the amount of bacteria in your fridge automatically. It sounds like really bizarre, people say, well, what the hell are you talking about fridge? But it's cool, right? And your fridge smells fresh and your food lasts longer. And I don't know why I was just taken with this thing. And I thought, this can't work. So I got it. And I never do product reviews. And it actually inspired me to do a product review on YouTube that I actually did. It's got a few looks. But yeah, that was a product, Shelfie. It's like really, really just a cool gadget for a whimsicalness of keeping your fridge fresh.
I'm gonna look into that like immediately. I've gotten so much into like longevity and health and everything. So like something like that is like right up. Okay, so I'm getting so it's Shelfie, SHELFIE.
Shelf, SHELFY,
Shelfie. It's a great name too.
Yeah, it's great.
Like
and it's great. And it's funny you should say that because you talk about the longevity thing. Quick plug out for David Sinclair, because I'm a big fan of David Sinclair, NMN and resveratrol and all that kind of side of things as well. And it was actually that side of things that was that actually went and inspired me to go and look at the Shelfie, and sort of intrigued me, because I think you mentioned it earlier, and I'll make it one of my last things because I'll talk forever if not. But you mentioned earlier about health and well-being and the toll that it has on you when you do these businesses and when you're traveling. And, I was a crazy traveler. And one thing I would say, and for everybody who's listening out there, look after your health, look after yourselves, and, really take it seriously about trying to reduce your travel and your stress and your strain and everything. I've just seen too many friends over the past couple of years, because I'm getting on a bit now compared to you. But I see a lot of my friends who are, either passing away or from stress or heart attacks and things like that. So on a serious kind of note, that sort of thing, like Shelfie, sort of grabs my attention, and the anti-aging stuff and the health stuff just becomes really, really important. And you talked about I've got a change in life. It's been really, really important for me to stop doing as much of that and do it in a more healthy way. I think that's been important.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I'll just say, like, you know, I've spent so much time reading and researching like health and longevity and everything. You know, I'm 37 now, so my report card is going to be due in my 40s as to what I do now. But I think the two things I found to be the most effective is that if you get your sleep right and you manage your stress, and I think whether you're an exec, especially for the sales reps, actually be on the lookout. I think it's releasing next week. I had a friend of mine who is a health coach, but also like a biohacker. Two entrepreneurs come on the show. But being a sales rep, it's like being a professional athlete. Yeah. And so I really encourage them to buy a wearable like a Whoop or Apple Watch or something, measure your data, do blood tests, you know, exercise, all these different things, because like these are physically and mentally demanding jobs, and we can't function at an optimal level nor have like good longevity if you're just running your body into the ground, like being on the road, having a drink every other night, eating bad food, you know, all these different things. So
absolutely,
no, I think that's great. Steve, thank you so much for coming on the show. Again, I want to recommend to the audience, and I want to make sure I get the website right, to check out your website, how to start up in medtech.com, correct?
That's it, yep.
Perfect. And you have a podcast as well, I believe, right?
Yeah, I just started a podcast which is called MedTech Mavericks, and I'll probably have you on my podcast on that one as well.
I love it.
Which is where I just want to mix it up a little bit, and that podcast will get some pretty crazy stuff going probably later in the year.
Awesome. And is the podcast on Apple and Spotify as well, or
it's on
where?
It's on Spotify. I can't get it up on Apple at the minute. There's a weird glitch in my system, but it's on Spotify now, and you can go and find it. It's MedTech Mavericks on Spotify.
Perfect. I'll recommend to my audience, just as a favor, like go check out the podcast, subscribe to it, and leave a 5-star review. So that's the first thing I'll go and do. It's important to get those reviews up. So Steve, thank you so much for joining us. I want to thank the audience for coming on the show or checking out the show. Check the show notes. We've left a lot of great things in there for you. I'm your host, Omar Khateeb. This is another episode of the State of MedTech, and we'll see you all next time.
Thank you for enjoying another epic episode of the State of MedTech. If you're feeling inspired and love this episode, do us a favor, hit that subscribe button and turn notifications on so you never miss an episode. And be sure to give us 5 stars and write a short review, because that helps more people discover this amazing community of ours. If you're a company who has an executive that you'd like to be on the show, or perhaps you want to sponsor one of the episodes, shoot us an email at hello@khateebandco.com. Take care, and we'll see you next time.